I never liked surprises. I always preferred plans, routines, things that made sense. But life has a twisted sense of humor when it wants to break you. It all started on an ordinary Tuesday. One of those days you never expect to be the one that splits your life in two. Jessica loved cycling. It wasn't just a hobby. It was her escape, her freedom. She'd wake up at dawn, strap on her helmet, and ride like the wind was chasing her. I admired that about her. I'd be at home, making breakfast for our kids, Emily, our daughter from Jessica's first marriage, and our little boy, Liam. It was our routine. Until that Tuesday. The call came just after 9 a.m. I was feeding Liam when my phone buzzed, and a shaky voice on the other end said, "Mr. Thompson, your wife's been in an accident. She's stable, but you should come to the hospital." My heart stopped. I grabbed Liam, dropped Emily off with a neighbor, and raced to the hospital. My mind spun with worst-case scenarios, but I kept telling myself she'd be fine. She had to be. Jessica was strong, fearless. She could survive anything. When I arrived at the ER, I rushed to the front desk, blurting out her name like it was the only thing I remembered. The nurse glanced at her chart, then smiled softly. "Oh yes, Mrs. Thompson's husband was already here earlier. He's with her now." I froze. My brain stuttered like it had hit a glitch. Already here? That couldn't be right. I was her husband. "I think there's a mistake," I said, forcing a shaky laugh. "I'm her husband." The nurse's smile faltered, replaced by confusion. "Oh well, someone's in there with her right now." I didn't wait for more. My legs moved before my brain caught up, storming down the hall toward her room. My heart raced, not with fear for her injuries, but with something darker, an instinct I couldn't shake. The door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open, and there they were. Jessica, my wife, wrapped in the arms of another man. Her hands tangled in his hair as their lips crashed together with the kind of desperation we hadn't shared in years. She wasn't just relieved to see a familiar face after an accident. This was passion, raw and unmistakable. I felt the ground shift beneath me. My phone was in my hand before I knew it. Instinct. I hit record. The man pulled back, his face coming into view. Brandon, Jessica's ex. The same ex she had cheated on to be with me. The realization hit me like a freight train. She had cheated on Brandon with me, and now she was cheating on me with Brandon. The cycle complete. I didn't knock. I didn't wait. I barged in. Jessica's eyes met mine, wide with horror. Brandon turned, his smug grin fading as he recognized me. "Well," I said, my voice shaking with something between rage and disbelief, "looks like the husband was already here." Jessica scrambled to pull away, her face pale. "Jake, Save it," I snapped, holding up my phone, the screen still recording. Brandon had the nerve to smirk. "Man, it's not what it looks like." "Oh, really? Because it looks like my wife's tongue was halfway down your throat?" I shot back. Jessica's face twisted, half guilt, half frustration, like I was the problem. "This isn't the time," she hissed, glancing toward the door like she was embarrassed by the scene. "Not the time?" I laughed, bitter and hollow. "You're right. Maybe I should have scheduled an appointment to catch you two screwing around." Brandon stood, trying to play it cool. "Look, Jake, this is between me and Jessica." I stepped closer, my fists clenched. "Oh no, Brandon. This is between me and my wife." Jessica finally snapped, her mask slipping. "What do you want me to say, Jake? That I made a mistake? That I still have feelings for him? Fine. There. Happy? Happy?" The word echoed in my skull like a sick joke. I stared at her, the woman I thought I knew, the mother of my son, the woman I'd been raising another man's child with, thinking we were a family, and it was all a lie. "I've been raising your kid," I whispered, the words choking me, "while you've been sneaking around with him." Jessica's face crumbled for a second, but then she hardened, defiant. "Well, you're not exactly perfect, Jake. You've been distant, obsessed with work. Maybe if you paid attention." I laughed again, dark and bitter. "Ah, there it is. My fault. Classic." I left without another word, but I had the video, and that was just the beginning. I drove home in silence, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing holding me together. My mind replayed the scene over and over. Jessica's tangled limbs with Brandon. The way she looked at him like he was her world, not me. I'd seen it all, recorded it, but the footage burned into my brain was worse than any video. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked the same as it always did, quiet, peaceful, like nothing had changed. But everything had. Emily was sitting on the couch, flipping through a picture book, her legs tucked under her. She looked up when I came in. "Where's Mom?" she asked. I swallowed hard. She wasn't just Jessica's daughter. She was Brandon's daughter, the man I just caught with my wife. "She's staying at the hospital for a bit," I managed, forcing a smile that felt like glass in my throat. Emily nodded, satisfied with the answer. She didn't deserve this. None of the kids did. But I wasn't going to be the fool raising another man's child while my wife snuck around with him. I waited until Liam was asleep that night before pulling out my phone again. I watched the video, my thumb hovering over the screen, debating what to do. Part of me wanted to delete it, pretend I'd never seen it, go back to the life I thought I had. But the other part, the part that knew the truth, wanted everyone to know. I didn't sleep. By morning, I had a plan. I sent the video to Jessica's parents first. No message, no explanation, just the raw footage of their darling daughter locked in a passionate embrace with her ex. I stared at the screen, watching the little, delivered, checkmark appear. My phone stayed silent for hours. Until it didn't. Jessica's mom was the first to call. I let it ring out. Then the text started. "Jake, we need to talk. Don't do anything rash. You're overreacting. These things happen." These things happen? Like it was spilled milk or a missed appointment. Jessica finally called around noon. I didn't answer. She called again and again. Eventually, she left a voicemail. "Jake, we need to talk. Please. You can't send that video to people. This isn't fair." "Fair?" I called her back. My voice was ice. "Oh, you want to talk now?" I said. "Guess it's only important when it's your reputation on the line." She sighed on the other end, that same exasperated tone she used when I forgot to take the trash out. "Jake, we can fix this. Don't make this worse than it is." "Worse than it is?" I wanted to reach through the phone and shake her. "I sent it to your parents," I said flatly. "Thought they should know the kind of daughter they raised." There was a pause, then a sharp intake of breath. "You're being petty." I laughed, cold and empty. "Petty? I was raising Brandon's kid, Jess, and you were screwing him behind my back. I think I've earned the right to be a little petty." She hung up. By the end of the day, the video had made the rounds. Her family, her friends, even a few of our mutual ones. The fallout was immediate. Some people texted me their support. Others, mostly her people, tried to spin it, asking if I'd considered her feelings, if I was blowing things out of proportion. It was surreal. But the kicker? Her parents took her side. They showed up at our house 2 days later, standing on my porch like they had any right to be there. I opened the door just enough to hear them out. "Jake," her dad started, his arms crossed like I was the problem. "This isn't the way to handle things." "Oh? How should I handle finding out my wife's been screwing her ex? A nice brunch? A thoughtful letter?" Her mom jumped in, her voice syrup-sweet but dripping with judgment. "Relationships are complicated. Jessica made a mistake, but you're being vindictive." I stared at them, barely able to believe what I was hearing. "I was raising their kid," I snapped, "and she was screwing him. That's not complicated. That's betrayal." Her dad shook his head like I was some stubborn child. "Families stick together through tough times. You should think about what's best for the kids." I did. I slammed the door in their faces. I filed for divorce the next morning. I wasn't going to be the guy raising another man's kid while my wife played house with her ex. I made it clear in the paperwork. I wanted full custody of Liam. Emily wasn't my biological daughter, and as much as that hurt, I wasn't going to fight for someone whose real father was waiting in the wings. The day we faced each other in court was the first time I'd seen Jessica in person since the hospital. She looked different. Not broken. Not remorseful. Just polished. Like she'd spent hours trying to look like she had it all together. A fresh haircut, carefully chosen outfit, That forced little smile she used to flash at dinner parties when she wanted to pretend everything was perfect. I wondered if Brandon helped her pick it out. She didn't look at me when I walked in. Maybe she thought if she avoided eye contact, it'd make everything disappear. But I wasn't the man who'd swallowed my pride for years. That version of me was gone. Our lawyers did most of the talking, throwing around words like custody and division of assets, as if we were splitting up a garage sale, not a life. But the tension between Jessica and me, that was the real battle happening in that room. When it was my turn to speak, I stood up, cleared my throat, and looked right at her. "I'm here to fight for custody of my son, Liam," I said, my voice steady even though my heart felt like it was trying to claw its way out of my chest. Because I don't trust Jessica to put his needs before her own. She didn't when we were married, and she won't now. Jessica's lawyer objected, claiming I was getting personal. Damn right I was. The judge allowed me to continue, and that's when I laid it all out. The video, the lies, the betrayal. Not just to me, but to Emily, to Liam, to the fragile idea of family we pretended to have. Jessica finally snapped. She stood up, her face flushed with anger. "You think you're so perfect, Jake? Like you didn't ignore me for years, buried in work, treating me like a roommate instead of a wife. What did you expect me to do? Just sit there and feel unloved?" The courtroom went silent. I leaned forward, locking eyes with her. "I expected you not to cheat. That's what I expected." Her face twisted like I'd slapped her. Good. She deserved worse. After the hearing, we had to meet privately with our lawyers to finalize the details. Jessica cornered me in the hallway, her mask finally slipping. "This isn't over," she hissed, her voice low but dripping with venom. "You think you've won because you embarrassed me? You're pathetic." I laughed, shaking my head. "I didn't embarrass you, Jess. You did that all by yourself." She glared at me, her nostrils flaring. "You'll regret this." I stepped closer, lowering my voice so only she could hear. "I already regret the day I met you. Everything after that was just damage control." She opened her mouth to respond, but I didn't give her the chance. I walked away. The custody battle didn't drag on long. The court sided with me. Full custody of Liam. Jessica got visitation rights, but even that was under supervision at first. The judge cited concerns about her emotional stability after reviewing the evidence. I didn't feel victorious, just numb. Emily stayed with Jessica and Brandon. That part stung more than I'd admit. I'd raised her from the time she was in diapers, taught her how to ride a bike, been there for every scraped knee and bedtime story. But blood ties? The court didn't care about those memories. Neither did Jessica. She moved in with Brandon not long after the divorce was finalized. They acted like nothing happened, posting pictures on social media with captions like, "starting fresh," and "new beginnings." It was like our life never existed. But I kept the video. Not because I needed proof anymore. Because sometimes, when I feel myself slipping into nostalgia, I watch it again. Not to relive the pain, but to remind myself of the truth. Of who she really is. And why I'll never make the same mistake again. Divorce isn't like in the movies. There's no dramatic music, no satisfying moment where you walk away stronger. It's quiet. It creeps into the corners of your life, showing up when you least expect it. Like when I reached for an extra coffee mug in the morning out of habit, or when Liam asked, "When's mommy coming home?" with those big, innocent eyes. I'd lie, not to hurt him, but because the truth felt like a sledgehammer I couldn't swing. "She's busy right now, bud," I'd say, ruffling his hair. But busy doing what? Raising Emily with Brandon? Playing house like our life together had been some failed experiment she'd outgrown? The anger never really left. It just changed shape, mutating from sharp, hot rage to a dull, constant ache. Jessica barely called after the court ruling. When she did, it was all about Liam. How's he sleeping? Is he eating enough? Does he ask about me? Like I was her secretary, not the man she'd gutted and left bleeding on the floor. One night, a few weeks after the dust had settled, I was sitting in the living room scrolling through my phone when Jessica's name popped up. Not a text, a call. I stared at it, thumb hovering over the screen. I should have ignored it. But curiosity is a hell of a drug. "Hello? Jake." Her voice was shaky, not the confident, smug tone she'd used in court. What do you want? There was a long pause. Then, can we talk? In person. I almost laughed. Talk? After everything? But something in her voice, it wasn't arrogance. It was fear. We met at a small coffee shop halfway between our places. She looked different this time, not polished or put together. Tired. Hollow. Like life had finally started to chew her up. She didn't waste time. I'm pregnant, she blurted out, her fingers nervously twisting the sleeve of her coffee cup. I blinked. Processing. With Brandon's kid, I assume? I said, my voice sharper than I intended. She flinched. Yes. I waited for the punchline, the request, because there was always an angle with Jessica. And then it came. But things aren't good, she whispered, her eyes darting around like someone might overhear. Brandon's, not who I thought he was. No shit. She kept talking, spilling her new tragedy like it was my problem to fix. Brandon was controlling, jealous. They fought all the time. He didn't want the baby. Blah, blah, blah. I sipped my coffee, pretending to care. When she finally paused, I leaned forward. So, what's this about, Jess? You want me to feel sorry for you? Want me to swoop in like the dependable guy I used to be? Not happening. Her face crumbled, and for the first time, I saw it. The regret. Not because she missed me, but because she missed the life she'd thrown away. You don't understand, she whispered. No, you don't understand, I snapped. I spent years cleaning up your messes. I raised his kid like she was my own while you played house with me. And now you want sympathy because karma finally caught up? She didn't respond. Just sat there, blinking back tears like they'd work on me. They didn't. After that meeting, she started calling more often. Not about Liam, about her. I'm overwhelmed. I don't know what to do. I made a mistake. Yeah, no kidding. I stopped answering. Blocked her number eventually. Liam didn't ask about her as much anymore. Kids are resilient like that. He had me. That was enough. Emily, though, she was a different story. I'd get occasional updates through mutual friends. Apparently, Brandon wasn't exactly father of the year. Surprise, surprise. Sometimes I'd see her at the grocery store or in passing. She'd wave. I'd nod. That was it. Jessica faded into the background of my life. Like a bad dream I'd mostly forgotten. Mostly. Because late at night, when the house was quiet and Liam was asleep, I'd think about it all. The lies, the betrayal, the sheer audacity of it. And I'd feel nothing. No anger. No sadness. Just relief. Part 5. The Return of the Past. Months passed. Life settled into something that resembled normal. Liam and I found a rhythm. Breakfasts filled with messy cereal spills, bedtime stories that always ended with him asking for just one more, and lazy Sundays where we'd build forts out of blankets and pillows. But even when you think you've outrun your past, it has a nasty habit of showing up uninvited. I was at Liam's school for a parent-teacher conference when I saw her, Jessica. She was standing in the hallway, talking to another parent, her face partially hidden under a pair of oversized sunglasses. I almost walked past without acknowledging her. Almost. But she turned at the last second, and our eyes met. There was a flicker of something. Regret, maybe, or shame. She gave me a small, hesitant wave. I didn't return it. I just kept walking, my jaw clenched so tightly I thought my teeth might crack. But that wasn't the end of it. Later that night, after Liam was asleep, there was a knock at my door. I opened it, half expecting one of my neighbors. It was Jessica. Her eyes were swollen, like she'd been crying. She looked thinner, worn down. Not the woman who used to spend hours perfecting her appearance. She didn't say anything at first, just stood there, shifting her weight from foot to foot. What do you want? I finally asked, my voice low. She swallowed hard. Can I come in? I almost laughed. Not a chance. She glanced around, like maybe the world was closing in on her. I don't have anyone else to talk to. I should have slammed the door in her face. I should have told her to take her sob story somewhere else. But curiosity? That damn drug? It got me again. I stepped outside, closing the door behind me. You've got 2 minutes, I said. She nodded, wiping her face with the sleeve of her jacket. Brandon left me. He took Emily. I didn't respond, didn't flinch. He's not who I thought he was, she continued, her voice trembling. He's controlling, manipulative. And when I told him I was pregnant, he flipped. Said he didn't want another kid. Said I was ruining his life. I stared at her, my face blank. Sounds familiar. Her lips quivered, but she pressed on. I don't know what to do, Jake. I lost everything. I crossed my arms. You didn't lose it, Jessica. You threw it away. She broke then. Really broke. Sobbing. Her body shaking like the weight of her choices had finally crushed her. And you know what? I felt nothing. No pity. No urge to comfort her. Just cold, hard indifference. When her sobs finally quieted, she looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. I miss Liam. I miss you. That made me laugh. A bitter, sharp sound that echoed in the night. You don't miss me, I said. You miss the stability, the comfort, the guy who cleaned up your messes. But he's gone. She reached out like she was going to touch me. I stepped back. Don't, I warned. Her face crumbled again. Jake, please. You just what? Want me to save you again? I shook my head. I'm not your backup plan, Jessica. I turned to go back inside, but she grabbed my arm. Jake, I'm scared, she whispered. I looked at her hand, then at her face. Good, I said, shaking her off. You should be. I went inside, locking the door behind me. She stood there for a while. I watched from the window as she finally gave up and walked away, disappearing into the darkness. The next day, I woke up feeling lighter, not because I'd confronted her, but because I realized something. Her chaos? It wasn't mine to fix anymore. Weeks went by after Jessica showed up at my door, and for the first time in a long time, there was actual peace in my life. Liam was thriving, laughing more, sleeping through the night without waking up to ask where his mom was. I thought maybe, just maybe, the chapter with Jessica was finally closed. But, like clockwork, chaos doesn't knock politely. It kicks the door down. I was picking Liam up from daycare when the receptionist waved me over, her face tight with concern. Mr. Thompson, there was an incident today, she whispered. My stomach clenched. What happened? She hesitated. Your ex-wife showed up. Of course she did. She tried to take Liam, she continued, lowering her voice. She wasn't on the approved pickup list, so we didn't release him to her. She got upset. I felt my blood boil. The audacity. After everything, after betraying me, after court ruled in my favor, she still thought she had the right to barge into Liam's life whenever it suited her. When we got home, Liam was quieter than usual. I knelt down in front of him, brushing the hair from his face. Did Mommy scare you today, buddy? I asked gently. He nodded, his little lip trembling. She was yelling. She said you're mean and won't let her see me. I clenched my jaw so hard I thought I might crack a tooth. Jessica wasn't just a bad wife. She was a bad person. Poison, seeping into everything she touched. And now she was trying to turn Liam against me. I wasn't having it. The next day, I filed for a restraining order. Jessica showed up at the hearing, looking like she'd rehearsed her victim act in the mirror for hours. She even had the nerve to cry on the stand, claiming she just wanted to be a loving mother. I kept my face blank while she performed, but inside, I was screaming. When it was my turn, I didn't hold back. I'm not here to rehash old wounds, I told the judge, my voice steady. This isn't about me. It's about my son. Jessica doesn't show up because she loves him. She shows up because she wants control. She's not a mother. She's a manipulator. Jessica's face twisted, her tears drying up real quick. You're trying to erase me, she snapped, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. I didn't flinch. You did that to yourself. The judge granted the restraining order. Jessica wasn't allowed within 500 feet of Liam or me. I thought that would be the end of it. But Jessica doesn't know when to quit. A few months later, I got a call from Emily's school. Mr. Thompson, the principal said carefully, we need to speak with you. It's about Emily. Why the hell are they calling me? I wondered. When I arrived, Emily was sitting outside the office, her face pale and scared. She ran to me the second she saw me, clinging to my leg like she used to when she was little. "Dad," she whispered. "Dad." That word hit me harder than I expected. Turns out, Brandon had left Jessica, for good this time. And Jessica? She'd gone off the rails. She wasn't picking Emily up from school. She wasn't feeding her regularly. Emily had shown up late, hungry, and alone one too many times. The school called me because, legally, I was still listed as an emergency contact. And now, here she was, this little girl who wasn't mine by blood but had once been mine in every way that mattered, begging me without words to save her. I didn't hesitate. I filed for temporary guardianship the next day. Jessica didn't even show up to the hearing. And just like that, I was raising both Liam and Emily. 2 kids. One from a woman who shattered me. One who was a living reminder of everything she'd done. But they weren't her kids anymore. They were mine. The first night Emily stayed with us, she curled up on the couch beside me after Liam went to bed. "Do you hate my mom?" she asked softly. I stared at the ceiling for a long moment before answering. "I don't hate her," I said finally. "I just don't care about her anymore." Emily nodded like she understood. And maybe she did. Jessica tried to reach out a few times after that. Emails, letters, even a voicemail where she slurred her words, probably drunk. I never responded. Because the thing about toxic people is they only have power when you give it to them. And Jessica? She was nothing to me now. Liam and Emily are older now. They don't ask about her anymore. And me? I'm not bitter. I'm not angry. Years passed, the way they always do, quietly, without permission. Life didn't pause for my heartbreak, and eventually, neither did I. Liam grew up faster than I was ready for, trading his bedtime stories for headphones and video games. Emily blossomed into a young woman with her mother's stubborn streak, but none of her cruelty. She called me Dad like it was the only name I'd ever had. And for her, it was. Jessica faded into the background. A ghost of a woman who once turned my world upside down. I hadn't heard from her in years, not since the last desperate, drunken voicemail that I deleted without listening to. She became nothing more than a cautionary tale in my mind, a reminder of how love, when poisoned by betrayal, can rot from the inside out. But closure doesn't always come wrapped in neat little packages. Sometimes, it shows up when you least expect it. It was a Tuesday. Funny how life-changing days always seem to be wrapped in the mundane. I was at work when I got a call from an unknown number. Normally, I'd ignore it, but something made me answer. "Mr. Thompson?" a woman's voice asked. "I'm calling from the county hospital. This is about Jessica." Jessica. The name hit me like cold water. "She's in critical condition," the woman continued. "We thought you should know. You're listed as her emergency contact." I almost laughed. Emergency contact? After everything? I hung up without saying a word. But I couldn't shake it. All day, her name echoed in my mind. Not because I missed her, not even close, but because for so long, she'd been this shadow lurking behind me. I realized if she died, there'd be nothing left to confront. No more letters to ignore. No more voicemails to delete. So I went. The hospital was cold in that sterile, indifferent way hospitals always are. They directed me to her room, and when I walked in, I almost didn't recognize her. Jessica looked small, fragile, tubes and wires tangled around her like vines. The woman who once made me feel like nothing was left of me was now barely a flicker of herself. She opened her eyes for a brief second. "Jake," she croaked, her voice raspy, like gravel scraping metal. I didn't respond. I just stood there, staring. For years, I'd imagined what I'd say if I ever saw her again. Some powerful speech that would make her realize everything she lost. But standing there, I realized there was nothing left to say. She tried to reach for my hand, but I didn't move. "You hate me," she whispered. I thought about that for a second. "No," I said quietly. "I don't hate you. I just don't care anymore." And it was true. I left without looking back. Jessica died 2 days later. I didn't go to the funeral, but Emily did. She stood by her mother's grave, silent, holding a single daisy. When she came home, I asked her how she felt. She shrugged. "I thought I'd be sadder." I nodded. "Yeah, me too." Life moved on. I eventually met someone new. Not the kind of love that sweeps you off your feet, but the kind that grows quietly, steadily, like roots sinking into the ground. She didn't fix me. I wasn't broken anymore. Liam graduated high school with honors. Emily went off to college, studying psychology. Go figure. One night, years later, Emily and I sat on the porch, watching the sunset bleed into the horizon. "Do you ever think about her?" she asked softly. I thought for a moment. "Not really," I replied. "She was just a chapter in my story. But you and Liam? You're the whole book." She smiled, leaning her head on my shoulder. And in that moment, I realized something. Closure isn't about forgiveness. It's about indifference. And I finally had it. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure to subscribe to Cheating Storytelling so you never miss an update on more jaw-dropping real-life stories. Catch you in the next video.